Hi, I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Brent Barnet, and this is Unlocking Potential on Brownfield, a content partnership with Advanced Agrilytics. Joining us this month is Travis Kimmel with Advanced Agrilytics. Travis, thanks for being here. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me back here, Brent.
Yeah, should have a good discussion here today, Travis. You might remind the listeners a little bit about your background with Advanced Agrilytics and some of the work that you do.
Yeah, so my name is, again, Travis Kimmel. I've been with Advanced Agrilytics since 2015. And in my capacity with Advanced Agrilytics, I lead a team of our lead agronomists placed strategically throughout our coverage area that really lead technical agronomy. I'm going to say training as well as in-field work specifically related to both research and then as well as our customer-facing group.
On this episode, we're discussing the importance of environmental factors that impact nitrogen and sulfur applications. So for corn growers, it is the time to think about how to best strategize nitrogen and sulfur for the crop this season. How do you recommend a grower approach this decision in their own fields?
Yeah, so Brent, it's going to be a little bit different for each individual grower, but what I would say, with our approach specifically, start with environment first. As we think about nitrogen and specifically whether you are practicing variable rate nitrogen today or using that technology or even a blanket nitrogen application. We try to coach our growers through, let's think about environment first and what environments are most efficient with nitrogen mineralization and what parts of the landscape are most challenging. And so you have to define environment first before you can really develop a solid plan.
How does the application of NNS depend upon the understanding of plant response within those specific environments?
Yeah, so as we think about areas, and we've talked about this in the past, as we think about environments that are further away from the water table, as you think about final deposition of water or rainfall events, acres that shed water, they naturally mineralize less nitrogen, less sulfur. And those acres are also the acres that dry out first. And so because of that, it's not only the total amount of nitrogen required, but also the timing of that application.
What are the three basic components and how do each of them matter?
Yeah, so as you think about three basic components, and I talked about describing environment first. So, start with environment, isolate mechanism, view yield as just the outcome. As we think about three basic components, specifically with nitrogen and sulfur, that first component to consider is total nitrogen required. And so what I mean by total nitrogen required, and in our view, or view this through the lens spatially. A lot of us are capturing yield monitor data. So spatial yield monitor data, that total nitrogen required, you think about the bushels that you harvest, you also have to sustain a plant as well. And so there's this above ground as well, let's just call it total biomass, which feeds into that total nitrogen required. And so you have to first account for how much crop am I really trying to raise within that environment. And then the second piece is really organic matter supply, which refers to, really total nitrogen mineralized by that soil's organic matter. And this is really critical to understand at that subfield level. And then really that third component is nitrogen loss potential. And this is a customized layer to us in which it really serves as a surrogate for bulk density or understanding really soil bulk density and nitrogen loss risk score at that subfield level.
What does landscape placement refer to in this context, Travis?
Well, as I referred to it a little bit ago, when I'm talking about landscape, we talk specifically about, where are you at in relation to the water table? what type of topography are you facing, slope, soil, moisture content, as well as really soil mineralogy, or let's just say soil texture. It's all of those things together and really what describe that environment on the landscape.
When we talk about sub-acre environment knowledge, how can growers use that to their influence for nitrogen and sulfur applications?
Yeah, so kind of back to what we talked about, really those three components. What I would stress the most really in all this is, you know, understanding that total nitrogen required. In dealing with XYZ consultant or even looking through university recommendations, we look at, nitrogen required to raise a bushel. The bushel is the yield. That's the outcome portion of this. It's those three components, total nitrogen required, the grain plus stover to sustain that plant or to build enough carbohydrate for that plant to reach physiological maturity on its own terms. And that's going to be very different across the field or within that field boundary area. And it's going to vary by environments or by landscape position. And then obviously that nitrogen mineralization component of that. So that organic matter is coming from soil sample data. Are you pulling a 6-inch core or an 8-inch core? That's going to influence what that organic matter reading is. And for us, really pulling that 8-inch core, we're trying to define really, as you think about effective rooting depth of that corn plant, we want to best represent really that depth of soil that is going to be most responsible for, well, I'm going to say that organic matter contribution. And then going back to really that nitrogen loss potential piece is defining at that subfield level how much nitrogen. You may have a good amount of organic matter, and so let's just say you have 4 or 5% organic matter. You may mineralize in upwards of 100 and 100 pounds, 110, 120 pounds or greater, depending on what that organic matter is in a specific landscape. But if that acre lays saturated, you don't realize all of that nitrogen that's being mineralized. You're losing it through denitrification, whether that's volatilization, it's leaving as N2 gas, or it's leaching down through the profile. You have to take that into account. You have to have some understanding around that. And so that nitrogen loss potential piece is a huge component. I think the other thing too is with that, it's then what do you do about it from not only a nitrogen recommendation standpoint, but something that's unique to us. And it's really that nitrogen stabilizer piece. And really, it's a prescription that we deliver to the cab today, but that really varies the rate of nitrogen stabilizer. And so, let's just use in the case, nitropyrin, for example. If nitropyrin works and really, puts in stasis, let's just say, that microbe that is responsible for taking ammonium and really converting ammonium to nitrite and then from nitrite to nitrate. If you're really truly slowing that process down, you want to isolate those environments within that field that are going to be at greatest risk for that, and then just that a nitrogen stabilizer rate accordingly. And that doesn't always agree with how you would want to vary that nitrogen rate. And so treating those two independent of each other and taking that into account really will help you drive towards, a better nitrogen use efficiency, but also overall nutrient use efficiency, better use of P, K, and stabilizing yield, regardless of what Mother Nature throws at you.
So you can really just kind of pull all this information and data together, right, Travis? And it just kind of becomes a plan for your nitrogen use efficiency then?
Yeah, it feeds into an overall plan. And as I've been with you in the past, we talk about, as our industry, we treat individual pieces. We don't treat things holistically. And I say that a broad stroke, that's something at Advanced Agrilytics we really hone in on is how do we put together, all of these individual pieces, specific mechanisms, understanding specific environments. How do you tie all this together in a whole system that, okay, can maybe start with nitrogen, but it's the nitrogen and seeding and how those two play together, as well as we've talked about in the past, spatial critical fertility. understanding soil moisture balance, and then rate of diffusion, and then how those pieces also tie in with everything else that you're trying to do. And that's really what leads to, I'm going to say, that better, a more consistent outcome overall.
Yeah, earlier you mentioned a landscape evaluation and prescription. What's the value of something like that over a do-it-yourself experimental approach?
Well, and I think experimentation is certainly good, um, and something you should be doing. What I would say the value in that is, and I see from one, I'm going to say from one um, consultant group to the next, there's varying, I'm going to say, methodologies on how we should approach this. One thing at Advanced Agrilytics, what we really hone in on, as you think about, and we talked about nitrogen mineralization for a little bit, if you hone in on specific components, knowns that have been well defined by the scientific community, okay, all of those things are happening or are responsible because of specific attributes that we need to define today. And so, we talk about organic matter, we talk about landscape position. Okay, regardless of what soil type it is, if we can understand texture as well as, I'm going to say, get to a more complete understanding, well, that's something that you can extend, I'm going to say, across acres. And it doesn't matter whether you're farming, in my case, Northwest Ohio, Central Illinois, or Central Iowa, Northwest Iowa, Nebraska, the mechanism holds true. And so, for us to be able to work within the landscape and, well, use what we have at our disposal to, well, create a more consistent definition around this, it allows us to expand into different geographies because the mechanism holds true as long as you can isolate it. And so that's really what I would say separates us from, I'm going to say, everyone else, as well as what an individual grower can execute on their own farm.
Travis, great insights here. Before we go, any final thoughts on the topic this month that you'd like to pass along to growers?
Well, as always, with our team in Advanced Agrilytics, we operate throughout the Corn Belt with over 40 agronomists that we send direct to the farm. We'd love to work with you and your operation to help create a more complete, robust plan.
Thanks a lot for joining us on this month's program, Travis.
Thank you, Brent.
Agronomic expertise, cutting-edge research, unbiased recommendations. You can read the latest agronomic blog at advancedagrilytics.com. This has been Unlocking Potential on Brownfield, a content partnership with Advanced Agrilytics. I'm Brent Barnet with Brownfield.